Hey everyone, welcome to Can't Afford to Record, the YouTube channel where we figure out the art of audio production together. I'm Robby Miller, and this is a really exciting video today because we're going to be getting in depth with the brand new plugin from Celestion, Speaker Mix Pro. Now this is going to go along with another video that I've made, so keep an eye out for it, because in the other video I'm going to be demoing a track which compares the sounds between the regular Celestion impulse responses and the brand new DSRs from Celestion. And you might be wondering, well, what are DSRs? Well, DSR stands for Dynamic Speaker Response. And to learn more about it, I caught up with Joe Elsom, Development Engineer over at Celestion. So, make sure you've got a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and you're ready to learn. I learned so much in this conversation. So a big thank you to Joe and Celestion for speaking with me and telling me more about Speaker Mix Pro and giving us a little bit of a walkthrough of the plugin. So without further ado, enjoy this conversation and do keep an eye out for another video that I've done that showcases some of the sounds from the Speaker Mix Pro plugin. Well, we are here with Joe Elsom from Celestion. Joe, thanks for being on this video with me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really, really good, and very excited. So excited I can't speak about Speaker Mix Pro, because you're one of the many moving parts that have brought all this together, and it's Celestion's first plugin, which is why it's so exciting. And I've been lucky enough to try it for a couple of weeks now, and yeah, just really excited to talk about it and excited to hear about the things you can tell us about what these new DSRs are, and take us around the plugin a little bit and tell us what folks can expect when using it. So I guess the first question is, impulse responses have been around for a while. We know Celestion have done an amazing job. I'm a huge fan of Celestion impulse responses, but tell us how the DSRs differ into what we know already.
Yeah, so it's probably best to start with contextualizing impulse responses.
Right.
So they've existed in the guitar world for a number of years now. Celestion have been measuring and selling impulse responses since 2017, and essentially it is the response of a system to an impulse in the most generalized description. So in the case of guitar speakers or guitar cabinets, amplifiers, and so on, it's and in the case of Celestion, it's the response of the cabinet loaded with Celestion speakers with a microphone. In our case, it's a SM57, Royer 121, and a MD421, and then TLM 107s for the room. And that gives a description of the response of that system, that three-layer system of cabinet, speaker, microphone, that when you put it into a plugin, into a convolution plugin, for example, and you play through it, you get the tone of the system. So it's essentially a little snapshot of that tone. So if you swap out the speakers for different cabinets, you essentially have access to possibly infinite combinations of speakers and cabinets, if that many speakers and cabinets existed.
Right.
As many as you want. So it's it's like having access to thousands of different cabinets in a live room, and so on, on a laptop, in a coffee shop.
Very convenient.
Yeah. So the impulse responses are static, and it's essentially means that when you play the strings harder, you hit it harder, you drive the amp harder, the response doesn't ever change. You still get the tone of a well-driven speaker, but it is entirely static in response to your playing at that moment in time. Which means that when you hit the strings harder with a real guitar speaker, you would drive more current into the speaker. It would break up more. You get a little bit more motion of the cone, the surface area of the cone, and it changes the tone. You get different harmonics generated, a different balance of the harmonics generated, and it's not just a tonal difference, but also a field difference. It's the system talking back to you that really immerses you in the tone itself. The static response, the impulse responses, while they are eminently practical and very, very useful, especially for live purposes, when you're on stage, you don't need any cabinets or microphones. They only ever give you that static response, regardless of how hard you drive it. With Speaker Mix Pro, Celestion have implemented a next generation of response called Dynamic Speaker Response. And these dynamic speaker responses, or DSRs, are essentially that. It's very self-explanatory. They are the dynamic response of that system. So in the same case as the Celestion impulse responses, we have cabinet, speakers, and microphone. And that chain in the dynamic speaker responses is described by a component level model that reacts to your playing and how hard you drive the speaker, effectively related to the input power, the wattage that you're driving into the loudspeaker. And then the nuance of how you're playing, which re-immerses the performer or the player from digital tone into that real feel of the speaker communicating back to you, because you get a different balance of the harmonics generated when you hit the strings harder, depending on where you're playing on the neck, how much power you're driving into it with Speaker Mix Pro, the plugin. So it's not just a step for tonal improvement, because impulse responses are very, very close to real tone.
Yeah.
It's the feel and the immersion, which I think is a very, very important thing to connect the player, the performer, to the signal chain.
Yeah, and that is the missing link. It really, really is. And I can see that is the sort of one of the many big goals of this plugin, and what you've developed is the feel. And there is, unfortunately, as great as YouTube is, we are never going to be able to deliver the feel of this plugin, in this video. So it is one of those things you just need to try. And once you try, here's the funny thing about this: it's hard to not hear these sounds and this feel again. It's kind of hard to go back to impulse, the regular impulse responses in a way. That's obviously not taken away from their amazing tonal factors, but there is a real feel. You really dig in the guitar pick into the strings. It really feels like you're playing with a speaker, a real speaker.
That's exactly the idea behind it.
Yeah. Okay, so look, I've got the plugin open up here. I thought maybe you might be able to talk us through a little bit, and some of the wonderful things going on here, so we can just have a sort of a better understanding for it, I guess. We're greeted with a wonderful Celestion G12 greenback right now. And I think, one of the coolest factors is, as before, again, on impulse responses, we get these great, balanced, dark, fat, thin sounds that come with the Celestion IRs, which sound great. This is cool though, because I can move whereabouts I want the microphone to be on the speaker, and sort of get a real, really pinpoint the sound that I'm after, and why it sounds that way. That's a pretty cool feature.
Yeah. So the a part of the DSR algorithm is that it's a component level model that is easily morphed and moved around its current state. So we begin with the tried and tested Celestion mic positions, of which we have from left to right in the interface: thin, bright, balanced, fat, dark, and dark 2, which you can snap to with the scroll wheel. The DSR, the dynamic model behind the DSR, can find positions between those mic positions. So it understands the dynamic response at each of those positions. And in real time, as you move the slider, it dynamically morphs itself into new positions. So there's no interpolation of responses in between those positions,
right?
Which is the case if you were to effectively interpolate between different impulse responses to find new positions in between.
Right.
So it's essentially giving you tried and tested tone that we know sounds good, after hours in the studio of finding these positions, and elaborating with the ability to morph between those positions, but without the need for interpolation, which means that you should never be able to find bad positions. It should only ever be interesting sounds.
All killer, no filler.
Yeah, exactly. So it's probably a good place to start to contextualize the plugin, because we've sort of got two parts to this, or even possibly three parts. The plugin itself, Speaker Mix Pro, which is a 6-channel processing suite mixing console and dedicated to speaker responses. So it is all about guitar speakers.
Yes.
And cabinets and microphones and the combinations of the three.
Yeah.
It's Speaker Mix Pro has got the next generation dynamic speaker responses that we've developed to work with Speaker Mix Pro. And that's the foundation of what it's built on, to mix between these dynamic responses and the feel of the different responses and so on. But obviously since 2017, Celestion been making impulse responses, so you can load it's also entirely backward compatible with impulse responses. You can load all your favorite responses if you want to. If you want to mix between them, 6 channels, you can load either or on any way you want. Room processing, mid-side processing, EQs on every channel and the master. It's a sort of tone hub, if you will.
It really, really is. Let's just have a look at maybe how we might pick a couple of mics. Could we try that? So here I am on channel 1, or fader 1. If I head over to my cab, which is probably this is probably set up with what I would use, I guess. But we'll go with we've got our speakers that we can choose from here at the top. I actually think I might keep it on the G12 greenback for this demo. Obviously we can go between the speaker cabs here. I've got my 1x12 closed, 2x12 open. 2x12 closed is always a good choice for me. It's kind of a go-to. And then they're all here. The mics that you would want on your cabinets are here. You got your Shure SM57, 121, 421. Again, I'm going to click the SM57, and the 57 is what wraps this selection up, isn't it? When I choose the microphone, that's it saying, okay, this is your package.
Yeah, so you would usually select from top to bottom. So the guitar speaker at the top, and if you for a moment hover over the guitar speaker, there's a little tooltip that gives you an idea of the sort of tone to expect from it.
Yes.
Which is useful if you're trying to explore new sounds.
Definitely.
Click the speaker, whichever preferred cab you like. The open back cabinets have the additional SM57 on the rear.
On the rear, yep.
If you'd like to mix it in, it's a nice thing to mix in a mic on the front, nice and snappy, and then fill in the low mids from the rear mic. And then choosing the microphone completes that selection. It doesn't close the interface because the user might be playing in real time or auditioning in real time and want to click between different mics. So you can click between the cabinet, different microphones, and hear the difference effectively as you're playing, or even go back to the speaker and choose a different microphone and cabinet combination and start again. So awesome. It's useful for auditioning like that. Once you're finished with the selection, you just click the close in the top right hand corner. And you've that speaker and cabinet combination is on channel 1 now. Perfect.
So I've got my fader up, but I want to have another microphone on this. So I'm going to go to channel 2, right? Fader 2.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll go to fader 2. I click the speaker again, and I know it's really boring, but I'm going to go with the same thing, but with a 121 instead.
Sure.
Can I do that? Yeah. So we'll go there.
You can have any combination of mics you want.
So
there's not really a limit. It's to explore, find sounds.
And that is the magic with this is there's almost an overwhelming amount of combinations, and actually we were talking before in a the other week about some really weird and wonderful things you can do. You can get really creative with this plugin. It's really exciting.
Definitely.
So I've got my 57 on fader 1, and I've got my 121 on fader 2. I can pan these left and right. I could have the 57 coming out the left.
Yes, yeah. Panning in any way. You can link the two if you want to have a left-right pair.
Okay.
You can link the pairs of channels. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6.
Yeah.
That can be linked in pairs. So you could have, for example, your really dry mics, close mics on 1 and 2, and then maybe 3 and 4, super wet, super wide, hard pan left, right, that sort of thing. So just to give some choice if you want to make something a bit more diffuse and wider sound, maybe for rhythm guitars or anything.
Yeah.
So you've got pan left and right. You've got the room send.
Yeah. Tell us about this.
Which sends a. So it's probably best to start with the text in the top right hand corner of the mixer channel below the EQ.
Yes.
Clicking on that, we have a number of different room send options.
Yeah.
So you can either send to the bus, which is the dark gray room channel on the right hand side.
This one here, yeah.
Or you have the SER, the speaker excited room, which is the same live room excited by that combination of speaker and cabinet.
Okay.
So you can either drive a choice of microphones, and on the room channel we have some vintage U67s, Apollo, Usonics mic, STC 4033, which are a pair of Coles, and the TLM 107s, which are already Celestion room mics. The speaker excited room is also TLM 107s, and that's derived from the Celestion room responses in the impulse response pack. So there's known room in there. So it's not just like, here's a new thing. You've also got what there was before.
Okay.
But in this case, it allows you to, if you want to send multiple channels to the same room and give the impression of multiple cabs and speakers being in the same space, you can do that. Or you can have each cabinet effectively exciting its own live room, and it's the same live room. So it's if you have, for example, like we have on channel 1 and 2, you can have channel 1 and 2 having different speakers, different cabinets exciting specifically their own room, and it's the equivalent of having 2 live rooms excited by each cabinet,
right?
Which is pretty cool. So so there's choice of rooms, and if you wanted to, you could load your own user room response onto each channel. So you could then have you could have 6 different user room responses onto each channel if you wanted to. And it doesn't have to be room. You could load any reverb response plate, anything you want really. There's no limit. Just an audio file, a WAV file you can load onto those channels and have something different on each channels. Sorry, carry on.
So I was just going to say, and by the way, folks, the room sound is so convincing. It catches me off guard every single time I solo that room, the room bus. I genuinely feel like I have monitors on, or there's a cabinet playing somewhere. It's a very weird sensation, but a very real sensation. You guys have done a great job with it.
Product of many days in the studio. In fact, it's the studio that builds the 3D render in the top part of the interface.
Right.
Where we have that big log wall diffuser in the back.
Yeah.
Lots of diffuse energy, and that's on the long axis of the room. So it's it's quite an impressive space, and one of our locals to the Suffolk area.
Yeah. So I would, if I let's just say, okay, I want some room sound. I can just turn, these are linked, so they're turning up what's being sent to the room, and then I can use the room fader to blend that in and to just get a bit more of a fuller sound if I want.
Yeah, and at the base of the room channel, you can click the text, and there's the selection of microphones.
There it is.
The U67, Apollo, STC 4033, and the TLM 107s.
Wow.
Or you can load your own room response to the bus, and that is occupies the user option. So in this case, you can have the bus room be your own room. You could have your own room on every single channel, and each DSR channel having a different room, or you can drive all of them to your own room or one of our rooms. Very versatile. So you can mix everything in one room, everything in different rooms, some things in different rooms, some things in the same room.
Yeah.
Which basically means to explore, try things.
Yes. Yeah.
Is the purpose.
Be weird and wonderful with this.
Absolutely.
Okay. The next really sort of exciting feature about Speaker Mix Pro is this thing that you had to explain to me a couple of times, but you explain it so elegantly. It's the Z curve. The Z curve feature. And messing around with this again, I totally get it now. And it's a feel thing. It really, really is just its own magic. But this is something that hasn't been done before, if I understand right. It's helping us couple the speaker and the amp that we're using to get the ultimate, tone or feel, right?
Yeah. So in fact, we may as well go through the whole of the input channel. So starting at the top left-hand corner, we have Z curve, or if you're from the UK, Z curve.
Yes. I'm a bit of both. I go between.
Yeah. So the DSRs themselves are component level models. So they have their own description of an electrical input impedance. And that's effectively, we have a conductor in a real loudspeaker. We have a coil that drives the motor
Mm-hmm.
and moves the cone, and
Mm-hmm.
that coil is made of some conductor. So it has a resistance, and that resistance is very frequency dependent. So depending on what combination of coil and basically what speaker you have, you get a slightly different input impedance. And then if you put it in a cabinet, you connect maybe multiple speakers together in series or series parallel if you're a 4x12, or whatever combination you prefer. You modify the impedance more, which is all frequency dependent. And then you have the acoustic loading of the cabinet itself as well, which modifies, add resonances, damping in certain places, and so on. So the system of guitar speaker in guitar cabinet represents a very complicated electrical input impedance. The output of an amplifier has a similar complicated electrical output impedance. In a real system, when we connect the two with a physical cable from the output of the amplifier to the input of the cabinet, there is a connection. They know about each other. And electrically, things are going on back and forward, and it is very important to the tone because the two are coupled together. One is responding to the other, and vice versa. There's a communication, a sort of synonymous relationship between the two that results in damping at certain frequencies. Maybe the low end changes depending if you're using a very high gain amp or a low gain amp. You can get slight under damping, and a difference in the high end, difference in the mid band. It's all very frequency dependent. That depends on what amplifier you're using, the output of the amplifier you're using, and the output impedance, and the input impedance of the cabinet, which is speaker cabinet dependent. So we have the DSRs, which have their own input impedance, and Z curve is effectively the output stage of an amplifier. Now, it's important to state that it's not a model of an amplifier, because right. Celestion, we're a loudspeaker manufacturer, and Speaker Mix Pro is about the guitar speakers and the cabinets. The output, in this case, the output of the amplifier is effectively a model of the transformer and the output coupling of the electrical impedance of the output. So you can put any amp model into the front of this, and it works fine. It doesn't make a difference to the tone of the amp in a kind of distortion context or anything like that. You can put any amp model into it. But it allows you, from the left-hand side of the Z curve in off to the maximum on the right-hand side, modify the output impedance of the amp model in Speaker Mix Pro to get the correct coupling between the amplifier model you're using and the guitar speaker and cabinet combination. So on the left-hand side of the dial, we have a higher output impedance, which is equivalent to a lower gain amp. And on the right-hand side, we're moving into like really high gain amps, where you get a slightly underdamped low end, so you get a little bit more chug, a slight scoop in the mid band, and then a little bit more at the top end, which is, it's kind of moving towards that kind of gent style, the 5150 big loud sounds. So it's effectively, in the digital domain, returning the real electrical connection between two component level models. And it's worth saying as well, the Z curve is entirely dynamic. Both parts are dynamic. Both parts respond to how hard you play.
Wow.
So it's the true connection between the two, which is something that is with impulse responses, where you have an amp model and then an impulse response. They don't know anything about each other. So this is returning the feel of the connection of the two together, which is very, very, very important to the tone.
Yeah.
It's the guitar speaker makes a huge difference to the tone. Cab makes a huge difference to the tone. Amp makes a huge difference to the tone.
Yeah.
They all need to know about each other.
Right.
And then you have a big happy family.
And we were sort of talking before about you might have if you're going through maybe like a JCM 800 sort of thing, or that kind of vibe, you might have it on the higher setting of the Z curve, the Z curve. But at the same time, you might want to experiment with it on a lower setting and see how that sounds to there's no right or wrong, is there? It's just there's more options.
Yeah, since we're working in a DAW with plugins, you could put any amp model into the front of Speaker Mix Pro, right, and adjust Z curve or Z curve wherever you like it. You can match it to the amp model you're using and get a very realistic signal chain from start to finish, and a very realistic feel of the coupling and the dynamic response. Or you can just get really weird and have like super low gain amps with a super high gain amp coupling. So the speaker's being driven by the electrical impedance and the damping response at the low end, especially of a really high gain amp, but the tone you're driving it with is very low gain. So you can get some interesting sounds that are not really possible in the real world, which is the benefits of the digital domain. We can do real things very well, and we can also do weird things that are interesting, which is new sounds.
Yeah, definitely. I love it.
Um,
Okay, and then we also have the delay button there as well.
So delay, if we're with a mono input like a guitar signal, and you want to add some width, click the delay, move the millisecond value to wherever, and it effectively duplicates your mono input onto the other channel, like the right hand side, for example. Delays it by a very small amount to just give you some width, which is cool, especially for rhythm playing. Or anything really. It's nice to get a bit of width, and you can choose that. If you click the text underneath the dial for the delay dial, you can change it to 2 different widening algorithms, or right to left. So your delay is on either side, or it's just delaying but adding stereo width by mid-side processing, with 2 different algorithms that have a slightly different width perception.
It's a very nice quick effect when you're just looking for, like you say, a widening sound. Or I've actually used it on some lead playing as well, where I just quickly throw it on, and it, just makes it sound, just gives it a little bit, width, a bit of a bigger sound. So it's really, really fun to play with. Okay, and then let's talk about EQ, because all the faders, all the channels here all have their own EQ, which is
Can I stop you there, because there is something that is subtle to the eye, but quite important with the input channel.
Yes, please do.
The blue fader on the left-hand side.
Yes.
The input fader.
Yeah.
It is not just driving the input signal as an increase in the gain.
Okay.
If you have loaded any DSRs onto any of the mixer channels, the input fader is effectively controlling the driving power of the speaker.
Okay.
So if you increase the input gain and activate, for example, the auto gain to monitor the output, so we have no difference in the net gain. If you increase the input gain, it's effectively increasing the power, the electrical power that's driving the dynamic model of the dynamic speaker response. So if you've got a Vintage 30 on channel 1, for example, and you drive it right to the max, you're driving that Vintage 30 at 60 watts.
Wow.
If you drop it down to the bottom, you're effectively driving it at like 1 watt. So you get power related tone, and then also as you play, the dynamic response modulates around that as well. So it's the effect of cranking into the speaker, and each DSR has its own power rating. So the blue 15 watts, the G12M greenback 25, and they all have that. So you can have a number of different speakers on different channels and have the same input gain, and they're all driving at their relative power stage of that input gain. So if you're right at the max for everything, everything's driving at its max power rating. So you're not overdriving certain speakers, you're driving it to where it's at its power rating.
That's really cool. It just and yet there are more options. There are more things to change your tone, more sounds to go and explore. Wow, that is cool.
It's a subtlety, but it's novel, it's interesting, and it really makes a difference, because it's not just dynamic in the response to your playing, it's dynamic to the power. So if you like the sound of guitar speakers driven hard, then you can get that, you can get towards that sound for sure.
You might get towards that sound more in this plugin than you might in your living room. We'll hear a Vintage 30 really get empowered here, won't we?
Yeah, Vintage 30 running at 60 watts is loud.
Yes.
Having done it, I you don't want to spend too much time being blasted like that, unless you're just rock and roll, and just go for it. But it's that's loud. So that's not it's not a home friendly tone. It's stage tone.
Yeah.
Which is the difference. Some the really awesome sounds and historic guitar tones are sometimes really, really loud.
Yeah.
And to get that, you need to be loud.
Yeah.
So
here we are doing it.
Headphones on.
Yes. Very cool. I like it. And then the EQ.
Yes. So every single channel has, and the master and the room, in fact, has its own dedicated parametric EQ.
Yeah.
You can open it by clicking on the small EQ window.
Okay.
And we've got a number of normal EQ nodes that you can activate by double clicking. moving around, and you have boost, cut, and the Q with the little slider tab. We then have the three sort of floating parameters, which are a high pass, low pass, and a tilt in the center, which if you activate, you can add a 6 dB tilt to the HF or the LF in whichever direction.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is quite cool. So if you've got a particularly dark mix that you want a little bit more at the top end, you can tilt it and the whole spectrum shifts.
Yeah.
Which is a nice little feature. Once you've set your EQ, or even while you're setting EQ, the EQ is activated itself onto the channel by clicking the little power button in the top right hand corner of the mini EQ window, and you'll see if you make any major changes that the changes in the major EQ window when you close it are shown in the mini EQ window. So it's useful for just tracking differences without having to have lots of EQ tabs open and clicking back and forth between them. You can see that this channel's got a little bit less HF, or you've got a boost here, and so on. And you can do that for each channel, room, or master, and the master will process the whole mix as a collective. So it's versatile. You can get interesting with it.
Well, look, Joe, thank you so much for speaking to us about it. It really has been great catching up with you, and let's speak again real soon.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
See you, man.
Bye.